Hi guys. My name is Alex, and I'm 14. I want to tell you about a couple of events that completely changed my life. It all started a couple years ago, when my parents were getting a divorce, and my mom said that my father wouldn't have the right to see me after that. I have to say, I totally expected something like this to happen. My parents were fighting all the time. Actually, they'd been fighting for as long as I can remember. And for me, they would always play good cop, bad cop. Mom would scold me for something, then Dad would buy me ice cream and calm me down. But during their last fight, Mom said that she was going to take custody away from my father and even forbid him from seeing me at all. The worst thing is that she would have done it. Dad didn't have a steady job, and he wouldn't have had a place to live after the divorce, so the court definitely would have taken away his custody of me. The next day, my dad came to pick me up from school, and he said that we needed to talk. He told me that I had the right to choose who I wanted to live with, and then offered me the chance to go with him to another city and start a new life. Of course, I agreed. At that time, my mother was the evil one that wanted to take my father away from me. So we packed up all of our necessary things and were about to leave when I asked, shouldn't we tell Mom that we're leaving? But Dad assured me that he'd already talked to her, so that's how I said goodbye to my home. As we were driving on the highway, Dad told me what we were going to do. He said we would stay at a friend's house for a week until he found a job. And then we'd rent an apartment and find a school for me. And then we would deal with all the divorce and custody stuff. Sounded like a plan. Dad was energetic and wound up, and his enthusiasm rubbed off on me. I felt like we would be fine. So I closed my eyes and fell asleep, preparing for something new in my life. We arrived at the house of my father's friend after the sun had set, but unfortunately, he couldn't let us stay with him. He had a family, and obviously there would have been too many of us in the house. Eventually, I found out that my dad didn't even bother asking beforehand if his friend would be able to host us. It was late, and we were tired, so Dad decided that we would stay at a hotel. This didn't fit into our plan, because staying in a hotel is pretty expensive, and Dad had no job. For several days, my father went to interviews in search of work. Unfortunately, each time he returned sad. He kept getting turned down over and over again, and soon the moment came. Dad said we were running out of money and we couldn't afford to stay in a hotel anymore. He tried to stay positive and convinced me that everything was going to be all right. But in reality, we had to live out of our car. It was terribly uncomfortable, but it was necessary in order for us to save money. Day after day, we were wandering around the city looking for work, and things kept getting worse and worse. And after one night, I completely lost my enthusiasm. We were running out of gas, and Dad came up with a plan. We drove into some kind of parking lot. Dad said he needed my help. He took a can and a hose and rigged up something to drain the gas from someone else's car, and I had to stand watch. After a few minutes, I heard a man yelling, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" Damn, I didn't notice him, and now he was running toward us. We started to run away, but he was catching up with us. Dad said that he'd hold him, and to meet later at the mall nearby. In fear, I just ran in a random direction, and a second later, I heard the sound of a falling canister. I was scared to even think about what was happening to my dad. 10 minutes later, I was sitting on a bench in the mall, out of breath. Soon, my father came. Oh my God, he looked terrible. His clothes were dirty, his jacket sleeve was torn, and his face had a huge bruise. It was awful. It turned out that the guy who was chasing us was a parking lot security guy, and he wanted to detain my father, but thankfully he was able to escape. Okay, Dad was fine. But now all our stuff was in the car, and there was no way to get to it because the security guy had probably called the police. So we had no money, no food, no water, and no place to sleep. We walked through the empty streets, hungry and tired. Not to mention that I hadn't showered in 5 days. Soon I was just falling over my own feet, and Dad said we were going to spend the night in the park, and that tomorrow we'd figure something out. Dad woke me up and said an unexpected phrase. "Son, I have great news." Good news is exactly what I needed. Dad said he'd found out about a place where we could get free food. But I did not expect that this place was a dining hall for homeless people. We were given a bowl of soup and a couple of pieces of bread, But as soon as I tried it, my eyes filled with tears. I was at the end of my patience. I couldn't do it anymore. I started crying and asking Dad to take me home to Mom. And it looked like my dad was tired of it too. So he admitted that he couldn't make it and that he'd figure out how to get us home. To cheer me up, Dad said he'd get us some normal food, and he left me waiting outside of a supermarket. I knew we didn't have any money, and I knew that my dad was going to steal food. So I started to worry when he didn't come out 10 minutes later. What if he was detained by security? But when the police car pulled up to the store, I knew for sure he was caught. I was scared, so I decided to just run away so they wouldn't catch me too. I just didn't know what to do. I wandered the streets until nighttime. I was scared, hungry, and terrified of everyone I met. People looked at me strangely. Of course, I was just a tear-stained child in dirty clothes who was walking alone in a big city. I had nowhere to go, so I decided to go to the first policeman I met and ask for help. And that's just what I did. They put me in a car and took me to the station. Officers and social workers asked me whether I was starving, whether my father had forced me to do anything, and other terrible questions. Then I was told that the police had been looking for me all day, and that my mom was on her way there. When she arrived, she ran to me in tears and hugged me tightly. As we drove home, she told me how worried and terrified she was. Mom said that the police had been looking for us from day one. Maybe for the first time in my life, I felt that my mother actually loved me. As it turned out, Dad didn't tell her that we were leaving. He only called her that morning after he had gotten arrested and said she needed to come because I was lost and alone in the big city. I was happy to go home, but I was really worried about my dad. Shoplifting is punishable by a fine, but for the fact that he had kidnapped me and we had to live in those conditions, he could not only lose his parental rights, but also go to prison. And that's what upset me the most. So, now it's been 2 years since then. My parents got divorced. Dad was lucky that he only received a suspended sentence for family kidnapping, if you can even call it luck. We talk pretty often by phone. Mom doesn't try to keep us from doing that. Apparently, after everything that happened, she realized how much I love my dad. And now she's trying to be the best mom for me. Dad promised he'd get his life back on track, get a job, and get his custody back. Who knows? Maybe then my parents' relationship will improve. Thanks for watching, guys. Tell me, would you be willing to live in those conditions for the sake of your parents? Share your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to see more stories that actually happened.